working. Thank you. Thank you. Whoa. Don't want that. Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Share. Then go to this. See, the problem is when we go to the little screen when you're presenting, if you're not right in the center.
Yeah, sure. I gotcha.
You don't show up.
Already kind of short, you know.
There you go.
Stand tall.
There
I might need that
you
step stool. Remember?
Yeah, you may need the steps too. Let's see. Let me go here. Now, this thing's, it may stutter on you. I'm gonna keep the controller right here.
Okay.
So that. All right, see, I've got it where this comes up, so I can manually unstick it right here on the, on this box. All right, so now, again, since they only put one in, I have to take the one out with your proposal, your defense on it. I have to put this in now. I bought this for me. Look at that.
That's pretty good.
It's almost like I work here.
Okay.
All right, you got that. We're recording. We'll wait for people to come in. There's the ding that says I should be done. Look at that. Made it by 15 seconds. So we're where we need to be, and I will keep AI chatbots. I'll delete them as they come up, and every time I do, it'll make it stutter, and then I'll unstick it down here at the bottom. So don't get nervous. It's not. And so the reason why we're doing the Zoom links and leaving is those chatbots, even when we stop recording, they're still recording.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we've had to start that, but we can't get everybody's chatbots out. They're recording it in our business. Cool. So this is it. You got something to drink?
I got some water.
Yeah. Joe went, wait for the break. I think he went through 4 bottles of water. I'm not making that up.
I'm trying not to drink, you know what I mean?
I'm not kidding. He went through 4 bottles of water. He reminded me of that old skit from Saturday Night Live about 30 years ago, the year that Martin Short was on there, and 60 Minutes showed up at his office to interview him, and he was sweating and drinking. That's what Joe looked like. But Joe did a good job. I don't know if you joined in for that one. He did a good job with his study. But boy, it was a struggle
To get him there, or like,
dealing with his district.
what was it?
He was doing,
Or where was it? Excuse me.
it was in Cabarrus County, just on the other side of Charlotte. And it took us 7 months from the time that his IRB approval until we had all the data. Took
Oh, wow.
7 months.
Wow.
Jeez. They took 4 months just to respond back to his request for the data after they had approved it. And then it took 4 months, and then when they got it, it took us a month to clean it.
And that's a pretty large county, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It took us a month to clean it. Because they just send it rough. It took a month to clean it, and they had bright protections on the spreadsheet, so you had to do it all by hand. And it had 100 and it was a survey. It had over 100 questions. Multiple columns, multiple sheets, took a month to clean it. And then, when you're doing, just like when you did qualitative, we have to have the first round analytics before we can start the second round.
Mhm.
So we had to get it cleaned. Do the thing, do the analytics from the survey, which developed the follow-up questions for his interviews. And then by the time he got all of them done, it was 7 months until we had all of his data to start the write-up. Took 7 months.
To start the write-up.
To start the write-up.
Oh my God.
Took 7 months. I've got one right now that's gonna top that one.
Really?
One of my ADCI ladies, I looked back last night, we've been in data collection now since November, December, January, February, March. We've already been in data collection 4 months. And by the time that we get it all, done, I'm guessing it's going to be, summer's coming up. I'm guessing it's going to be August before we get it all collated and get it together where we can start, we can start the process. I'd say it's going to be August.
When I was going through the data, I could just hear your voice echoing easiest path to data, easy, because that one day you came in. I think it was the semester before the last, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, sounds like easiest path to data, easiest path to data.
Mm-hmm.
And
You think that's just going to be, oh, I'll just get my data.
no, 7 months. Oh my God.
7 months, and that's not unusual.
Really?
I've got three more in the hopper that are going to get theirs in this week. And Sean, she's one of my organizational leadership ladies. She took a better part of a year.
A year for data. Oh my gosh.
But it was longitudinal. I mean,
I got
you.
Yeah, it's like a case study almost,
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Doing
got
a case study.
Oh, okay.
There you go. I mean, that's what case study means, at least a year.
Yeah.
And then Kay's is in. Hadn't heard from Kay's yet. Forgot about her, so that'd be 9. She did phenomenology. And the write-up's like 200 pages.
Yeah.
So it took her the better part of a year through data collection and write-up, took about a year on hers. Because she did phenomenology. She had to check in with them over time. She was doing burnout. And you can't just do a one time.
Right, you can't, no, yeah.
That's
Interesting.
So hers was a longitudinal phenomenology. So hers took a year from the time we started to the time we got it in the can to do the write-up. It took a year. That's why I tell y'all, case study, phenomenology is there on either side. Do a descriptive, qualitative in the middle, and you can get done in a reasonable amount of time. But when you start adding all these other layers, case study means time over time.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, let somebody pay you to do that. I mean, I did one. I told you I did one.
Yeah.
8 years.
Wow.
So
you just got done with it.
Got done with an 8-year case study. That is correct. 8 years. I mean, I initially planned for it to be 5, but because of COVID, I had to go back 2.5 before COVID, 2.5 during, and 2.5 after. I had to have 7.5-year data collection to balance each 3 of the data collection cycles. You should never try to do any kind of a case study or phenomenology without at least 3 cycles of data. And that's just kind of the rules. Even though, it's not dissertation work, it's still the same rules.
Yeah. There's James Harper.
Good for him. As soon as everybody gets here, as soon as him and
I'll run to the bathroom then.
Dr. Stone get here.
I'll rush. You said down the stairs over here on the other side of the building?
Yep, all the way at the other end.
Just use the bathroom.
I already went.
To your screen. All right, I'm gonna do this right here for the time being. There's Dr. Hartman.
I'm here.
How are you today?
Doing well. Just got finished one for Converse.
Yeah, good for you.
Starting on another one.
So I hope that you have all of your need to ask questions out on the last one.
I do. I do.
Oh, yeah. I tell mine, the time for that's before we get here.
Yep.
Now's the time for you to tell your story. That's what I want to hear today. I want to hear the story. Entertain me. No, we do appreciate you being with us today. I told Carter, he's running to the restroom right quick, that as soon as Dr. Stone gets here, we're gonna roll.
That sounds good.
Everybody else. Now, I have sent you an email. So what we have to do because of the chat bots is I will stop this one. I'll leave this room and leave them in here. And then I've got a second link to a Zoom, to a Microsoft Teams.
Yep.
And we'll get on that for committee deliberation because that can't be recorded.
Gotcha. I'm with you.
Yeah, we've had to do that. These chat bots are breaking in, even if you stop the recording, they're breaking in and recording our stuff, and so.
Yeah, I see it right there. The links. Yep, I see
Yeah,
it.
yeah, the Zoom is for this one and Microsoft so that we don't get crossed over.
So what do? They jump in. I had never had that happen at
They
Converse.
just, that, it's, that stuff's a virus. I mean, they'll start just trying to break into the meeting in a few minutes and I'll have to take and delete them and deny them access.
Wow.
It's so aggravating. And once they're in, you can't turn them off from doesn't matter if you stop record or whatever. Anything that's in the room, they get it.
Wow.
Which is very, very disconcerting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There's Carter. We can close that door. I don't think anybody else is gonna be joining us today. You don't want them to anyway.
Yeah,
Oh, that's it.
that's my brother Aaron, that's who that is, yeah.
They're probably all watching this phone.
That's good.
That's cute. All right. We're just waiting on. Mute my phone. Soon as we get the other one in. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I hadn't heard back on K's yet on that phenomenology.
That word haunts me. So,
Well, and she made an emotional choice for committee. And that she wanted two of her former professors from her undergraduate program on her committee. And that's fine. But she did a phenomenology, both of them quantitative. And so it was
see
literally
the issue.
hit and drag Bob. Having to explain to them more than her what next steps would be in the phenomenology. I mean, it's even more involved than just a straight descriptive qualitative. I mean, phenomenology, you're not really looking for themes, you're looking more for patterns. And the data is their voice, not themes. That makes a difference in the write-up.
Sure.
How many times have I told y'all in a qualitative, descriptive qualitative, the data is not the voice. It's the themes.
Right.
That's your data, not the voice. It's exactly the opposite in a phenomenology. The data is the voice. And you look for patterns in it, not themes. You look for patterns, shared patterns. Coding is completely different. And you got two guys that are just quantitative.
Yeah.
They were like me and Laura.
I mean, it's gonna make it more difficult. I mean, absolutely more difficult.
They were like Stadler and Waldorf, the two old Muppets that sat in the balcony and just made ugly comments all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I got you.
Yeah, so it was a struggle, but we got to the finish line. And
There.
That's one of my colleagues, Shane. Yeah.
My mom.
Oh, that's cool. There might be some people joining it, I guess. I didn't know yes or no, but I guess. But I just don't see why you would make your first one of these.
that's what I mean.
That's
Why would you do this the first time out? But I've told you, Lowe's and Home Depot make billions of dollars a year on people overestimating their ability.
Oh, sure, that's a good point.
They watch a video of somebody laying tile and they think they can lay tile. They go over to Home Depot and buy a bunch of tile and grout and adhesive and make a mess and have to pay some fly somebody else to do it. But why, if you know, if you're a novice,
That's what sister. Oh, right, if you're not, that's what, absolutely. See what you're saying.
I don't know who the sound. Dr. Stone said he was gonna start on his phone and then be on his laptop. So I don't
That looks like-
know who that is on the Samsung.
That still lives in what, or where's he?
Well, he's
Somewhere.
got a place here locally, but he lives in Lenore, in Caldwell County. I think he has an apartment here somewhere nearby.
Sarah.
There's Sarah. She's from Yadkin.
Yeah. No, she's close to me now.
Yeah, she's one of the ones that talking about hers will go in.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I got it today. Hopefully, I've got to work on her appendices. I'll put it in probably tonight.
Is that Steve's though?
Yeah. See all these note takers?
Yeah, what are the,
That is the box.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
why do they have that? I thought Zoom would have something like that.
It does have some. Well, that's David Wester's. It's really good. It's dad at work. It's Jeff.
Oh, that's my
It's
dad.
your dad.
Oh.
Okay.
Gotcha. He don't take his mic or
Okay.
you can text them.
We're
Yeah,
good.
that's my dad.
Everybody's good. We just got to get Dr. Stone.
He's so cute. Oh, look at your dad.
Or something, but
They're just. Stony, so.
Yeah. As soon as he gets here, we're gonna start. Yes, we got.
there you go. Sorry. Oh, it's my sister. Yeah. A large family now.
Boy, I tell you.
It's my sister. Yep. There's Steve.
Hey,
Dr. Stone.
Hey, Dr. Lamb.
hello there, Dr. Stone. How are you today?
I apologize for being late.
You're fine.
Carter, I apologize.
No, I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
We're getting ready
And
to
is
go.
that you in a coat? Is that you in a coat?
Coat and tie.
And a
Look at
tie.
it.
My God, take a picture.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah. We got it on video for posterity. All right, let me move this out of the way and make sure it's going to unfreeze here. Yep. So it should work now. Good afternoon. This is the final defense for Carter Baran. He's a doctoral candidate in the College of Education and Educational Leadership. I'd like to start out by thanking his committee, his full-time faculty member, Dr. Steve Stone, and his content expert, Dr. James Hartman. Thank you both for joining us today. Without further ado, Carter Baran.
All right. Well, I just kind of want to take the moment to kind of and this is a big deal. This is crazy. Want to take the time to thank my committee, starting with Dr. Hartman. Our early morning talks, like I said, I truly appreciate those. It really helped my mind just keep going, right? Really think about the process of writing a dissertation and just kind of keeping my head in it all, right? Dr. Steve Stone, again, you were the first professor I spoke to here at Gardner-Webb. I think I got moved out of your class, but I had some faculty saying, no, you got to get into Steve Stone's class. So try to get back in, but I truly appreciate your help in the last 3 years. Like I said, I mean, all through it. Thank you so much. And then Dr. Lamb, yeah, thank you so much for being my chair. You really got me through this. So I owe this to you. Thank you so much. Well, let's jump into it. So the title of my dissertation is Reaching the Finish Line, Teacher Perception of Intervention Strategies to Reduce Dropouts and Improve Student Engagement in Rural Schools. Oh, I have a clicker here. I forgot about that. So I kind of want to just give a introduction, kind of go over my chapters 1, 2, and 3, and then jump into my findings, chapters 4 and 5. So my introduction. All right. So again, how did I get to this? Right. So I started off thinking about what engagement is. Right. Didn't really know where I wanted to go. If I asked you what engagement meant, or asked somebody, normally they would reply back with, well, that's when you engage people. Right. So I didn't understand why there wasn't a definition in it. So I really wanted to dive into that. But then I started looking at the idea of instructional programs that were meant to, well, help engagement, but also they were meant to help graduation rate and get students to not drop out. And so again, this is all kind of how it all got started. And again, persistent challenges related to student absenteeism, credit deficiency, and dropout risk. These are things that matter in high school, right? And this is, like I said, that's where the study took place. So programs such as Math 180, Read 180, Ingenuity, extending learning opportunities like Saturday and summer school. Again, these were all meant to re-engage students back into the classroom and get those numbers up, those graduation rates, that kind of thing. So just a little bit of the background of the problem. So living in South Carolina, the #1 indicator for school performance, well, is high school graduation, right? So high school graduation, we get ETSI report card. It assigns a score, and that score, like I said, is an indicator, a fundamental indicator of how well a school does. So the lower the score, some people might be hesitant to go to that school. The higher score, the better school, according to SC report card. But Yarbrough 2016 did a study where he saw there's large disparities that often translate into SAT and the ACT, which often lead to lower post-secondary enrollment. And of course, without a college degree, you maybe can't make more money, so reduce economic mobility. But also, again, if I'm not good enough to go to college, maybe might as well just drop out, right? I'm gonna go get kind of like a gopher job or an apprentice job. Again, school districts are trying to catch up implementing this by implementing different academic interventions like Read 180, which works on that reading basics, right? Math 180, which works on that fundamental of algebra, that kind of thing. Ingenuity, which is credit recovery, those lost credits that a student may have failed, let's say in 9th grade, and they're trying to make it up for 10th grade. And then summer school, like I said, if you failed it, you got a chance to pass it. And then Saturday school, which kind of acts as that, attendance makeup. So diving into my conceptual framework, I have Alexander Aston theory of student involvement, and this is how I define, how I have defined engagement after this study. But it's that quality and quantity of energy students invest in educational experience. So I really want to talk about that just a little bit. So quantity, so how much, right? So how much energy or how much, like I said, how much effort, right, involvement am I going to put towards this, right? And then the quality. So I'll jump into this a little bit later when I'm talking about Albert Bandura. But he looks at environmental influence, right? So the quality of something, is it negative? Is it positive? So he says that if it's a negative, if it's a negative influence, you're going to have a negative outcome. If it's a positive influence, you might have a positive outcome, vice versa. So again, the quality is just as important as the quantity. And then Albert Bandura, his social cognitive theory, this looks at self-efficacy, right? So one's belief in one's ability to achieve outcomes, and this is through social persuasion, reciprocal determinism, as well as mastery experiences, which I'll dive into all of those as we move along. All right, just to kind of a recap of my chapter 2. These are the main ideas. I chose 4, and we'll go through each one. So graduation and dropout rates, rates. So the National Center for Educational Statistics 2023 says that there are major dropout disparities among rural students, students of color, and low income. All right. In South Carolina, rural students living in living in poverty are 4 times more likely to be absent from school. So you can see how it may not be a problem for all districts, but how much of a problem it is in the rural setting. And then again, Farish, Hirschman, and Willoff say there's a sharp decline in academics going from 8th grade to 9th grade, which again, being in high school, the importance of credits in high school. So if a student is starting off, well, bad, right? If they can't get to that 6 credit mark that they need to be 10th grader, well, again, why would they want to keep going, right? We're talking about, I'll get into this, but structural barriers, access, right? Transportation, all that. All these things are against students. So they're being set up, they're kind of being set up, right, to fail, and it's very difficult to get back, right? Graduation and dropout risk. Bridgeland talks about how high school dropouts face reduced civic engagement. This is what I was just talking about the last point. Limited social mobility, again, being able to move and make more money, right? Increased long-term dependence on public assistance. So I can't make more money. Prices are going up. I have kids now. How am I going to make more money? So again, it's not just, oh, they got out of high school, they dropped out of high school. It affects their entire life moving forward. And then again, this talks about Bandura's social cognitive theory. This is such an important point of this whole dissertation, that academic failure combined with lack of support in, like I said, transportation, no food on the table, don't have enough clothes. Again, it erodes self-efficacy. And again, I want to really focus on that word erodes. It's not all at one time, it's over time. You know, we're thinking about a little small child over the years, trying to make it, but again, they have all these different things. They might not have to support at home. It takes away from their character, that self-efficacy, which matters, right? And he goes on to say, creating a cycle of learned helplessness into adulthood. So again, it's not just a one-year problem, it's the entire life. The third main idea is academic interventions, which again, we looked at, but now we're focusing on teacher self-efficacy directly impacts the fidelity of implementing those strategies, right? So fidelity is the right way, right? That's the best way I can say it. It's the right way to do it with the right effort, right? And then academic recovery is helping schools significantly. So we see that. However, A.R. Moore and A.A. Washington caution schools when implementing programs like Ingenuity for credit recovery, because again, if the academics are not, if a teacher is not there helping them through it and making it like a classroom, the learning becomes superficial, right? So this idea of superficial mastery happens, which again could go into obligation of law, right? So are we truly teaching the SC graduate profile, right, using these programs? So again, they help, but at what cost? And then student engagement, kind of the overview of this whole thing. We have Philip Schlechty, who talks about engagement precedes learning, right? So therefore, engagement cannot be understood as a byproduct, as a behavior, right? But is conditioned. So I think this as kind of like a runner, right? So if you want to be good at something, you got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it. Same thing with engagement. It's not just a one-time little thing. It happens from early childhood all the way through. And then in Mahoney and Zane, we look at that students, even in the best design interventions, right? Excuse me, they're less likely to benefit, again, if they don't have that engagement piece. Even the best well-designed interventions. These interventions are expensive. This is a lot of research that has gone into these things. So they might be set up for success. However, if there's no engagement, they're saying it won't work. And then we talked about barriers. The SC report card talks about rural students face barriers that may limit this engagement opportunities, right? So for example, social economic stability, being stable in finances, making sure I have a meal when I get home from school, transportation, getting to and from school, right? In advanced courses. Again, I mean, those advanced courses start very young. So if we're not in advanced courses here, we may not be able to take those advanced courses later in high school, which may get us in college, and I might not do so well in the SAT, ACT. You can see how it goes. All right, jumping into my research questions. I had 4 research questions. The first one, how do teachers perceive the effectiveness of intervention strategies in promoting student engagement and active involvement in academic tasks? So again, this is aligned with Aston's theory of student involvement because it looks at that environment, how important that environment is. And then again, it relates to how that affects student efficacy. Student efficacy, excuse me. Research question 2, how do teachers perceive their own self-efficacy in implementing intervention strategies to support student academic recovery and graduation? So now, again, this aligns with Bandira's social cognitive theory because it looks at the teacher side of it all, right? So we want our students to have that self-efficacy, that belief, that desire to learn. However, if there's no positive outcome, again, how does this affect teacher self-efficacy? Number 3, in what ways do teachers and administrators believe students' self-efficacy influence their participation and success in intervention programs? So again, this kind of merges both of those conceptual frameworks, talking about the self-efficacy part, but as well as that intervention design and how that goes towards that success for that student achievement. And then how do teachers evaluate the relationship between intervention program design and student involvement, particularly in rural high-poverty school settings? And like I said, this aligns with my conceptual framework because, again, it looks at that program design and how that interacts with student involvement, which is Aston. All right, methodology and research design, just a brief overview. It was a qualitative methodology. I had 18 certified educators from 3 groups: core, elective, administrative. Core is English, math, kind of those core subjects. Electives could be art, PE, all that good stuff, and administrative, any administrative, so principal, assistant principal, instructional coach, that kind of thing. As you can see, 18 is kind of that perfect number for saturation. Kaiser and Marconi talk about it in 2017. Individual interviews and focus groups, that's what I did. We had 14 interview questions. They were vetted by my committee. And then after the interviews, using a thematic analysis, using Navivo, we came up with 20 focus group questions, but then went back and cut it down to 10 through my committee. And I just talked about Navivo for data analysis, excuse me. And I guess let me explain Navivo really quick. It eliminates bias, right? So this software, again, I mean, the software kind of pinpoints these main ideas instead of looking at all the big words, right? So everybody might be saying the same thing, but what does it mean, right? So that's why we went that route. The limitations, and ethical considerations. Limitations, rural district, so may not reflect urban or other school districts, rural school districts, and then limited sample size due to experience and intervention strategies. So we had about 100, and we kind of narrowed it down to about 60, 70 people that met this criteria. Delimitations, I only wanted certified educators, and then we were only looking at Math 180, Read 180, Saturday Summer School, and Edgenuity, which is credit recovery. And the ethical considerations, which is IRB and district approval. I received that right after my proposal. The interviews were confidential. Informed consent was given to all participants. They signed, like I said, I let them know that if they didn't want to be a part of this at all, they could just tell me, no questions asked. And then they were given pseudonyms, so they were not able to be identified. All right, jumping into chapter 4. This is the really good stuff, and I'm really excited to share this with you guys. So just a reminder about the research question. So how do teachers perceive the effectiveness of intervention strategies in promoting student engagement and active involvement in academic tasks. So theme one, and you will see how this kind of ties back to the rest of the findings. So psychological safety as the foundation of student engagement. So participants consistently identify psychological safety as that condition for student engagement intervention programs. So if we're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So if I created the Baran hierarchy of needs, this would be level one, right? So again, this aligns with student involvement theory, excuse me, which learning does not just require your physical presence. It has to have that psychological connection to learn, right? So some participant voice I really wanted to bring up. So again, they identified students would enter their programs with history of academic failures. So again, a lot of these programs are for those remedial classes. So Rebecca, a core teacher, explained that some of these kids have already failed so many times that they shut down before they even try. All right, especially, and I'll get into this a little bit later, especially working with students in high poverty rural areas. We see this across the board. Again, for their whole school life, again, there's always something that's kind of got in the way. So it's almost easier to be disengaged because kind of just accepting this is how it already is, right? Malachi, a core teacher, goes on to say, we have to make it feel safe. If they think they're going to be called out for being wrong, they won't engage at all. So again, it goes back to that psychological safety, being in the classroom, right? That the best way, a sense of belonging, right? That I'm meant to be here. So how does this tie into our literature, right? So again, we look at the literature defines engagement not just as something that someone does, right? But it's something that's behavioral, emotional, and cognitive, right? And I think that's the best way to define engagement, right? So again, I think we think about it as if we were just behaved, right? We feel like we're, focused in, and I'm getting that we're engaged, right? But we have to be emotionally connected. We have to be connected here as well, to keep it going, not just for that one lesson, but to continue it throughout education. And again, it talks about that fear of judgment are less likely to invest effort into academic tasks, regardless of program design. So Schlechty talks about that in 2002. And then again, it goes on to that rural and high poverty context, that these stressors, right? The literature further emphasizes the relational trust and emotional safety are prerequisites for sustained engagement because you have all these stressors that are before, right? So again, we're not getting kids that are emotionally here and stable, right? So no, majority of the time, right? We're not having people coming in to learn, right? So again, they have to have that relational trust and emotional safety as a prerequisite before they have that engagement, before they start to learn. So finding for research question one, theme two, visible progress and goal ownership as drivers of engagement. So I planned on, the best way I could give an example is Mr. Lemster's 5th grade classroom, right? So again, that multiplication table chart, when I got past my zeros, I got a sticker, right? When I got past the ones, I got a sticker. It's those mastery experiences that I could see that visible progress, that goal ownership. I did that, right? So it's those mastery experiences that really matter, get the kids excited. Again, I had my brain excited. What is next, right? So even when we move past multiplication, I already had that self-efficacy. It built up my self-efficacy through those mastery experiences. So again, participants describe visible progress tracking and student goal ownership as critical mechanisms for sustaining engagement intervention settings. All right, this is so important. This aligns with both Aston's emphasis on behavioral investment and Bandir's concept of mastery experiences. Just explain that, right? So feel good experiences in education make students want to learn more. So participant voice consistently agreed that visible student progress played a critical role in increasing engagement within these intervention settings. So Cure, a core teacher, says that once they see progress, they stop avoiding the work, right? This is followed by Ms. Shippey, who's an administrator, added that they need to see how close they are, not just how far behind they are. And I feel like in education, like I said, I think this supports this idea that we see that, hey, you got a -3, you got a -5, that should motivate you. However, it's just eroding, goes back to that Mendira, it's just eroding that self-efficacy to a point where they just kind of lock out, don't want to do it no more. And then Jordan, a core teacher, offers a plan saying that setting goals with them instead of for them makes a huge difference, right? It talks about that attainable goal. And as educators, we always want to say, well, I know you could do more. However, it's that belief of that student, right? So it might be baby steps at first, but soon enough, as that self-efficacy grows, those baby steps become big steps. And soon enough, they're creating their own goals for themselves. So, excuse me, the analytic link to the research question, excuse me, some water. Oh, wow. So Wang and Eccles, 2022, they saw that engagement increases when students can see tangible evidence, right? We just talked about that. Schlachty talks about when, this is one of my favorite findings with the literature as well, are more likely to engage deeply when schoolwork is designed to produce a sense of accomplishment, right? So now we're talking about design of the schoolwork. It's not for so much compliance, but it's intentional in, again, it's intentional in being, or showing a student that they can accomplish something, right? So it doesn't have to be a letter grade. It doesn't have to be, you did this wrong. It is set up to show the student they can accomplish, right? That's the goal here. And then Van Deer's social cognitive theory suggests that visible progress and goal attainment function as a mastery experience. That word again, mastery experience, is so important. Mastery experience of getting or winning that race of getting to the multiplication tables first makes me want to go even farther and become first in the division or whatever it is. And then triangulation of data required, or excuse me, research question 1. So again, it talks about linking engagement, safety, and relevance, right? So Aston's theory, situation engagement within students' behavioral and psychological investment. We talked about that with the psychological safety of theme 1, right? And then Bandeira's concept of reciprocal determinism explains how supportive environments elevate self-efficacy, right? So we go back to that idea of, if it's a positive influence, you're going to have a positive outcome, right? So we see that in our schoolwork as well, right? If it's set up for a positive outcome, well, excuse me, it's a positive influence, you're going to have a positive outcome, right? So Cancer 2023 confirms that emotional connection, transparent progress monitoring, heightened participation in remedial programs. This is so important. This stuff is so good. This is so important. Schlechty 2002 assertion that engagement must be designed in the work itself. It goes back to, again, we're not here just for compliance. We're here for accomplishment, right? Accomplishment helps engagement. And then again, it goes on to that combined relational trust with clear, attainable goals. That's level 1. All right, findings for research question 2, theme 1. Just a reminder about the research question. How do teachers perceive their own self-efficacy in implementing intervention strategies to support student academic recovery and graduation? So now we're taking the focus on the teacher, right? So theme 1, teacher self-efficacy develops through observable student success. So what did we just talk about? Again, that visible progress for students that helps student engagement. Well, same thing for our teachers, but it's through that student success that helps our teachers grow in their self-efficacy. Teacher confidence is an outcome of seeing students experience measurable growth. These are students succeeding are our mastery experiences. This is what's so important. That's why it's so important to, again, the schoolwork is designed for accomplishment. Participant voice, Malachi, core teacher, explained that when I see them start turning work in, it reminds me that I'm doing something actually right, right? So again, this individual sees that the want to turn work in, right, is helping his own self-efficacy. So Jordan, a core teacher, expressed that if you never see growth, you start questioning whether the program is worth the effort, right? And we'll get into this a little bit about how interventions should be set up and that kind of thing. But again, it's that growth part, right? We're all educators here. When we see somebody that just can't get it, you almost start reflecting on yourself, right? And why is this happening? How can I help you? And then Michael, administrator, said that implementation fidelity and student success relies on student engagement and teacher input, which highlights the reciprocal relationship between engagement, instructional effort, and outcomes. Analytic link to research question. So participants describe self-efficacy as developing through experience rather than existing fixed personality trait, right? So again, we like to think of it, but again, we don't walk into the room, right, with the best self-efficacy, right? That's developed through that student work. That's developed through student success, right? So again, it goes back to that mastery experience. Student success is our mastery experience. That's what we want to see, right? So teacher efficacy strengthens when teachers can clearly connect instructional actions to student growth, because again, teachers see it as, well, I did that, right? I was able to support them in that, which furthers, just again, supports my own self-efficacy. And then this is the part that I talked about a little bit earlier, talking about JT Moore and A.L. Washington talks about where teachers who work with disengaged students, so rural students, high poverty students, that visible student success serves as a critical validation that sustains that confidence and persistence, right? So what we see in a lot of these intervention programs is it might start off good, but again, over time, right, if the program is not set up for success, over time, it falls into that compliance, which falls into, let's say, lack of confidence, persistence, if you don't see the results that you need. All right, findings for research question 2, theme 2. So collaborative support strengthens teachers' confidence and persistence, right? So the best way I like to think about this is professional learning communities, PLCs, right? So again, collaboration with administrators, counselors, instructional coaches. Our participants consistently said that when everybody kind of has that piece of the pie, they feel more comfortable going into these intervention strategies, or excuse me, implementing these interventions with fidelity. So participant voice, participants stress the importance of collaboration and share responsibility among staff as essential to both teacher confidence and student success. So Ashley, an elected teacher, emphasized the role of administrator support, stating that when administration backs you up, you feel more confident trying new things, right? So in a minute, I'll get to how administrators are architects of these interventions, right? But we'll get there. But again, that administrative support helps that self-efficacy, helps that confidence. Mary, an elected teacher who prioritized teamwork and noted that when everyone is pulling together, you don't feel like you're fighting it alone, right? So it goes back to that collaboration piece, and it goes back to having those professional learning communities. Because if, let's say you're having an issue and read 180, math 180, you're able to kind of fix it, find a solution. You don't feel so alone. And then Jackie, an administrator, expanded on this idea by noting that a team with an intentional plan is essential to successful collaboration and success, emphasizing the importance of structure, purposeful teamwork, right? It goes back to that word intentional, right? It goes back to what Schlechte was saying about, going back to the idea of that intentional, making the schoolwork intentional. Because again, if you're intentional with the schoolwork to have success, you're going to have success down the road. So analytic leak to research questions. So we look at Bandira's concept of social persuasion, which posits the engagement, feedback, and validation from others, strengthens efficacy beliefs, increase persistence, right? So we talked about that support, that successful environment, that positive environment, right? All these different things bring validation to that teacher, right? It builds that self-efficacy. And then we talked about collaborative professional environments, enhance teacher resilience and implementation fidelity. So having that PLC, having that professional learning community is so important. Cancel talks about, he emphasized that shared leadership and collaborative planning increase teachers' willingness to adapt to interventions and sustain effort when progress is incremental. So again, it goes back to that collaborative nature. It goes back to that teamwork. And this goes on to Aston's theory of motivation, offers a complementary explanation suggesting that persistence is influenced by environmental factors that shape perceptions of performance outcomes. That is so important. All right, triangulation of data for research question 2. So overall, teachers perceive their own self-efficacy as dynamic and socially constructed, right? So remember, it's not fixed. So it's developed just like students, right? So again, that convergence of collaboration, structure, and affirmations aligned with research, professional efficacy. We talked about that, right? JT Moore, A.L. Washington found that teachers' confidence rises when schools provide data systems and collegial support for interventions. So again, making sure those communities are in place already to support teachers, both new and tenured teachers. And again, Darling Hammond talks about that sustained through reflective communities. Again, those PLCs are so important. And then that shared responsibility, everybody has a piece of that pie, which goes back to Bandira's reciprocal determinism, in which environment and belief mutually reinforce one another, right? So that's what we see in these PLCs. That's what we see in that collaboration. All right, moving along to findings for my research question 3, theme 1. So I just talked about this a little bit. Oh, excuse me, let me reinstate the research question. So in what ways do teachers and administrators believe student self-efficacy influences their participation and success in intervention programs? So theme 1, we just talked about it. administrators as architects of intervention climate, right? So I'm not saying develop the actual intervention itself, but it is setting the climate or setting the setting the role of when it's brought in and when the district wants it to, this is how it's going to be done, kind of being that cheerleader for that, making sure that it's implemented with fidelity and making sure that it's not brought with a negative, right, that negative influence, right, that we already talked about. So again, administrators consistently describe their role as shaping the emotional and structural conditions under which interventions succeed, right? So it's set up by its leaders. The school will take the personality of its leader, right? So if you are putting in an intervention program, this is what the participants were saying. If you're putting in an intervention program and it's seen as just another thing, well, again, that negative influence, you're going to have a negative outcome. So again, participants noted that administrative messaging, leadership visibility, consistency directly influence teacher buy-in and student engagement, particularly in rural high poverty contexts. So some participant voice and the core teacher. The standard is set through administration and how effective each intervention will be based on how it's presented to the teachers. That is so important, like we talked about before. If it's brought in as this is just another thing, you have set yourself up for your outcome. And then Ken, an administrator, we have to set the tone that is support, not failure, right? So again, we go back to research question 2 that talks about teacher self-efficacy, right? They want to feel supported. They want to feel heard. They don't want to feel alone. And again, that starts with its leaders, right? So again, if they need the support, you give them the support. It's that professional development. So it's not set up to fail. So analytic link to research question. So again, it talks about that school climate leadership practices are critical determinants of intervention success. We just talked about that, especially in rural high poverty context, which again, in the next research question, we'll talk about a little bit how that can act as a barrier, which actually hurts student success. Schlecke, 2002, emphasized that leadership framing influences whether initiatives are experienced as meaningful or performative. All right. Again, I understand as an administrator, you want the numbers, right? But it has to start as a meaningful way to help students. That's where it starts. And then we look at Harper Simmons 2023, psychological supportive leadership environments increase teacher willingness to engage in challenging instructional work. So again, it goes back to if teachers feel supported, right? So now we're defining that support. If teachers have all the tools they need to be successful so that students are successful, again, you see that they're more likely to engage in those more challenging instructional tasks. Just talked about this a little bit. Theme 2, monitoring accountability. So again, it might start off really good. It might start off the right way. However, it is up to the administrators to make sure that it's being done correctly, it's being done with fidelity, and that spark, I guess you'll call it, that it keeps going, right? So participants explained that without consistent oversight, intervention programs gradually drifted towards minimal compliance, that's what we see a lot of. And with minimal compliance, you start seeing minimal success in our students. Participant voice, Ken, administrator, highlighted the importance of oversight in technology-based programs, stating that online programs only work if someone is checking behind it. So again, if we have an ingenuity class, if you have a credit recovery class, how important the role of that teacher in that class is. So it's not just sticking someone in there to watch them while they do their computer work. No, you are an active participant in that child's education, even if it's through these programs. Brandon, an elective teacher, who explained that when interventions rely too heavily on independent online completion, students often go through the emotions and try to complete modules as fast as they can, right? Which again, that limits meaningful engagement. We talked about that. A.R. Moore and J.T. Washington talks about how that learning can become superficial. We talked about that earlier, and we don't want that. We don't want that superficial mastery, because again, it just leads to compliance, not the success that we want. And then Tony, a core teacher, if there is no direct guide or rule book, teachers may get off topic or not teach what they're supposed to, right? So even in the most well-designed interventions, right? So you might have that rule book, but again, it's that professional development, it's that keep going, making sure they stay on task. People could get off task, and which could, like I said, it's not going to accomplish what we want in the intervention. For the intervention, excuse me. So Bandier, the analytic link to research question. Bandier, social cognitive theory. the topic of reciprocal determinism, it talks about environmental structures, right? So if the environment is not set up, like it says, not set up to monitor, it's not set up for that accountability, it falls into that compliance, right? So this finding aligns with literature indicating that program fidelity in secondary intervention settings is heavily dependent on leadership-driven accountability structures. So it goes back, the literature supports this idea, it goes right back to it. And then again, excuse me, I always get weird about this name, but Skunk Di Benedetto, I think that's how you said it, further emphasize that clear expectations and feedback strengthen outcome expectations, right? So again, being the role of the administrator, making sure that it's done with fidelity, but again, it's that expectation that we want to follow as well, and increases the likelihood that educators will persist in demanding an instructional work, which ties back to the following theme, the prior theme that talks about that support, that teacher efficacy, self-efficacy is supported through that additional support, right? Through that professional development. All right, triangulation of data. A.R. Moore, A.L. Washington noted that administrative support, monitoring, communication, maintain fidelity, right? We talked about that. Kansoy stated that frontline implementers are the key to successful interventions. So how we start is most likely how we will end. So if it's not started positive, that positive influence, again, you're going to have a negative outcome. Daily 2023 stated that programs must account for teacher well-being as a precondition for successful delivery, right? Our teachers set up for success. I think that's the question, right? So if a program, if it's not implemented in that way, you're not going to have success with our students. And then again, this reflects teachers' call for structured interventions that support engagement, right? All right, and then finally, research question 4, theme 1. Let me reinstate the question. How do teachers evaluate the relationship between intervention program design and student involvement, particularly in rural high poverty school settings? Let me give some water really quick. All right, theme 1 is going to look a lot like theme 1 of research question 1, but that shows you how important it is, psychological safety in relationships as universal success factors, right? That's the level 1. If we can't get past that, again, how you're not going to have engagement, not going to have success, right? So our participants consistently describe psychological safety in relationships as conditions that cut across all successful intervention efforts, regardless of the program, right? So again, if the trust isn't there, especially when working with students of poverty and students in rural settings, if the trust isn't there, you will not have engagement. So again, student entry into the classroom with histories of failure, we talked about that. Absenteeism, discipline, academics, right? Participants note that when classrooms or programs are intentionally framed as supportive, the mistakes are normalized, respect is non-negotiable, students are more likely to attend, participate, and persist, right? So again, students want to feel a sense of belonging. They want to feel wanted, right? Yeah, it's a remedial program, but again, we have to get that idea of, well, you're remedial. This is why you're in this class, and turn it into, well, I'm here to help you. We're all like, it's a family, right? It's a sense of belonging. Participant voice, Tony, a core teacher, if they don't trust you, nothing else matters. It's just what it is, right? Michelle, an elected teacher, safety comes before academics, and we see this all across the data. So analytic link to research questions. So again, that supportive relationship function as social persuasion. It strengthens that student self-efficacy. I would also argue that it strengthens teacher self-efficacy if they feel that they are trusted by that student. So student involvement is grounded in emotional, psychological engagement, not simply physical participation, right? That goes all the way back to we talked about in our chapter 2. It's not just the physical presence that matters, but that psychological presence, right? And then again, Schlechte, love Schlechte, he's really good. That meaningful engagement occurs when students experience schoolwork as affirming, right? It's not a gotcha, it's not you're wrong, I know you can't do this, it's not compliant, but again, it's affirming. That rather helps that self-efficacy instead of destroy it. And then Denton 2023, Dub 2022, Graham, they all, again, relationships do matter. And I kind of laughed when I kind of came to that conclusion that, just a joke among administrators, you always ask, well, did you try to connect with him or try to have a relationship with him? Well, it matters, that does matter. So I thought that was a little funny, but. All right, findings for research question 4, theme 2. I talked about this earlier in my presentation, but structural barriers limit consistency and access, especially when dealing with students of poverty in rural settings as well. So transportation, staffing shortages, inconsistent technology, Wi-Fi, persistent barriers that constrain the effectiveness of these programs. If the student's not there, they can't learn, right? So that's level 1. Staffing shortages reduce the availability of certified teachers, right? So Brian and participant voice, Brian administrator says that if they can't get here, they can't get credit, right? And we have this thing, failure on attendance. So if they miss too many days, well, they can't even get credit even if they went to summer school. So Brandon, elected teacher, shared that I've had students that take care of their parents and other kids, explaining that for some students, school is not their first priority when they are caretakers themselves, when they have their own families to take care of. Again, a 15-year-old, 16-year-old taking care of family, academics is not their first thing. So again, if we're going to put them in these intervention programs, that psychological safety, that relational trust, that this matters, this will help you. Again, it matters even so much more. And then Ashley, elected teacher, how do we implement these programs the way we should, or they should be when our students are having such challenges? Analytic link to research questions. So again, rural school systems face systematic challenges. We talked about that. So that disrupts these extended learning opportunities. All right, and undermine that implementation consistency. And I'll talk about my implications of practice of how we could really address that. Assets, inform, and perspective. These structural barriers limit students' capacity to invest time and energy in academic tasks, thereby reducing opportunities to meaningful involvement. Right. So again, we want students to feel connected psychologically, cognitively, that kind of thing. And then again, repeated access barriers erode. It goes back to the idea of social cognitive theory that erodes students' outcome expectations and self-efficacy, right? So it shows again, reinforces that idea of that relational trust, that belonging, having a place, feeling that I can do something instead of kind of just saying, well, you didn't turn that in, sorry, right? All right, triangulation of data, research question 4. So again, findings resonate with contemporary scholarship emphasizing relational trust. We talked about that. Continuous feedback as pillars as rural school improvement, right? And then we look at, Fixon and Blaze talks about the underscore that scaling interventions requires coherence between individual actions or organizational systems. So I want to explain that a little bit. So like I said, individual actions that an intervention is taking into account these different barriers with our students, right? So they're saying the best way to implement these interventions are when we're taking in those ideas of those different barriers, working around them, as well as having an organized system for that. And then empathy-based flexibility aligns with equity-centered leadership, and that's just so important, right? So being able to be flexible in these kind of things with our interventions. All right. Water. Talk a lot. So what does this all mean, right? So summary of findings. Very first thing, I talked about it all through this presentation, relational trust and psychological safety in students. That is the precondition of engagement, right? So this engagement leads to sustained motivation, which creates visible progress and shared ownership, right? It's that trusting environment that creates all these different things. So again, they come together to create goals, right? Track progress. That self-efficacy may develop, right? That's the goal. We want students to feel good. We want students to know that they can do it. So they're more willing to engage, right? So shared accountability transforms the learning from something done to the student to something done with them, right? They're a part of the learning. So it's not so much a sit and get, but again, you are helping me teach you, right? You are part of the process in all this. And then finally, systematic coherence and equity-minded flexibility, ensuring that students' barriers are taken into account, especially in high poverty rural areas. So when Tier 1 instruction, targeted interventions, and empathy are in place, educators can respond effectively to student needs. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but quality Tier 1 instruction includes those interventions. All right. So overall, these findings support both Aston and Banderas frameworks, illustrating that involvement and self-efficacy operate reciprocally, within the complex ecology of rural high school interventions, right? So again, all through it, you see, like I said, those mastery experiences, that engagement, that student involvement theory. All right, jumping into implications of practice. For research question 1, promote student engagement and active involvement, right? So again, we want to design our intervention environments that prioritize that relational trust and psychological trust, right? So again, this is embedded visible tracking tools like charts, reflection journals, data dashboards to make academic growth tangible, right? So it's all about, yes, it's going to be small steps first, but soon enough, as a student can see that they can attain different goals, they will make bigger goals, right? And then rebrand as opportunities for growth rather than a punishment. So instead of saying you're in this class because you failed this other class, again, this is an opportunity to grow as a learner and enhance that identity-based motivation, right? So again, your identity is not remedial. Your identity is, like I said, you're learning, right? You're growing. That's who you are. So research question 2, strengthen teacher self-efficacy in implementation. So districts should establish structured PLCs. We talked about that, where teachers regularly share successes, analyze data, and observe peers implementing different interventions, right? Sustain coaching, feedback loops, right? Working with instructional coaches, especially with our new rookie teachers, how important that is to set that expectation. And then celebrate the small wins. Canso talks about this, those celebrations, even if, like I said, it's an A on a test, how much that affects both teacher and student success and fidelity, in these programs. So again, it talks about that reinforced teacher beliefs that their efforts translate into meaningful impact, right? That's all we want. We want to know that students are learning. We want to know that we help them. Implications for practice. Research question 3, administrative leadership and system sustainability. So again, administrators should act as architects of psychological safety and accountability. We have to be the cheerleaders, right? We may not agree with it, but again, they're not paying us to, to disagree, right? But again, we better go out there, smile on our face, really pushing this, and like I said, making sure that our teachers are set up for success so our students succeed. So balancing empathy with clear expectation, that's so important, as well as embedded empathy-driven equity policies. Okay, so flexible attendance recovery, right? So if a student can't get to Saturday school, how else can they make up the time, right? Transportation solutions. If a student can't ride the bus, or again, we got to figure this out. Technology access. If the student doesn't have Wi-Fi at the house, well, we better get them a modem or something. Just again, we eliminate those barriers for learning to happen. And then again, I talked about this improved tier 1 instruction. And it's my belief that quality tier 1 instruction involves the intervention. I remember you talking about, well, you don't want to say, you never want to say too much about these interventions because they're making money. But again, quality tier 1 instruction involves that intervention. It involves that small group work. It involves that academic feedback, right? And then finally, research question 4, synthetic and collaborative improvement. So again, everybody kind of has a piece of the pie. That's what that talks about, that cross-role collaboration teams, right? Align intervention scheduling staff with community realities, right? So again, working in a high poverty, low income area, rural area, do the staff know where the students are coming from, right? Do the staff understand the challenges of those barriers that those students are facing? Integrated data systems that allow for real-time monitoring of student progress. Again, because we talked about that visible progress helps self-efficacy. And then accountability frameworks, intervention outcomes should reflect both performance and belonging. Again, that word belonging is so important. So I created a policy pillars, right? So we have 4 pillars. So policy pillar number 1, psychological safety as a graduation strategy, right? This is so important. So a trauma-informed intervention training for teachers. It goes back, do we understand where our students are coming from when we're teaching them? Do we understand their barriers, right? And prohibit that deficit-based labeling of intervention students. I say just get rid of the word remedial, right? And approach it differently because it would have an impact. A policy pillar 2, teacher self-efficacy as an implementation lever. So focus quality tier 1 instruction, getting back to that quality tier 1 instruction. Coaching cycles tied to intervention outcomes, right? That positive influence will have that positive outcome. Protect planning time for our teachers, right? So again, we have all these interventions for our teachers. we want it to do well. We want student success to happen. Well, again, let's not take away from it. Let's give them the time they need to meet with their PLCs. Let's give them time to, again, have that professional development that's going to make them successful in these interventions programs. Excuse me. Policy pillar 3, fidelity through leadership and oversight. So required blending learning models as well as adult mentorship for credit recovery students, right? So again, credit recovery is it helps definitely. It gets the credits back that we need. However, it shouldn't be a standalone solution to graduation, right? Which again, with adult mentorship, you can really connect with those students and getting them back into a normal classroom, getting that credit graduating. And then see policy pillar 4, structural equity supports eliminating barriers that impact student learning, and then family engagement. What we see a lot in these enrolled districts is they engage through different things like sports, right? So you might have 3,000 people come out for the football game, but 2 for the parent-teacher conferences, right? I think we need to reevaluate that and try to get people excited about their academics. And then finally, recommendations for future research. So again, I explore that student perspective on self-efficacy, which would only further validate Aston and Bandera's models in rule settings. I think that'd be really important. And then maybe do a quantitative study using validated engagement efficacy scales to provide that statistical generalization to supplement the qualitative insights of this study. And then I think the most important is that 22nd century student. I understand that's however, 80 years away or whatever it is, right? But the 21st century student is living in a changing world, and more interventions are supplementing that tier 1 instruction, which can be dangerous, right? And I think we really need to start reevaluating that so that, my children's children are set up for success instead of relying heavily on these interventions, right? All right, questions?
All right. Well, thank you, Carter.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll stop our share now. You get
So,
back.
so Carter, if I can ask one quick question, was there any big surprises from your findings or anything that didn't go with kind of what we traditionally thought about? I mean, anything kind of stand out?
And I think that's a great question. I don't think it really is something negative, but going back to that relational, or excuse me, that relational trust, that psychological safety, how important it is on that level 1, and again, I'm guilty of it all. That's saying, that students should have the motivation to do this. But then when I saw the emphasis through our participants of all that, it kind of, I don't know, I felt conflicted, right? I felt like I was the problem, if that makes sense. So that, again, I wasn't taking the time to really focus on those barriers and how they affect our students and how they affect, again, how it affects that psychological safety and that psychological trust and how meaningful it would be, right, to have those things in place. So I think that really stood out. Yeah, I think that stood out.
So follow up to that, Carter, if I may. So
Yeah.
when you become superintendent in a couple of years,
I like
will anything from your research play into your focus or your strategic planning, or I mean anything from your research? Because that's what the purpose of your dissertation is about, is to learn from it. And there's lessons to learn from the district. But you personally, when you move to your next leadership role, what's the lesson learned for you?
That's a great question. And again, it goes back to, am I keeping the idea of student success first, right? Am I really understanding wherever I'm at as a superintendent, right? Am I really taking into account in my strategic planning what my students go through, what our teachers go through, right? And are we taking the time to really develop that self-efficacy, right? Is that something that we're being intentional about? So I think that's something that I would really take into my new leadership role, is just making sure that I truly understand the people I'm working for, so to speak, and that I'm eliminating barriers so that learning can happen. I'm making our staff really focus on those psychological, that psychological safety, that relational trust as first, because again, when you have that, you're going to have that academic success. It's all about teaching and learning. I think that's something you said. It's all about teaching and learning. However, again, my focus would be if we can't have that relationship first, right? If these students don't trust us, if these families don't trust us, how are we going to have success? So yeah.
I think you'd be very successful if you go in with that approach, Carter.
All right,
Thank you.
Dr. Stone. Dr. Hartman, thank you again for working with Carter on this project. We'll go to you now for questions.
All right. Yeah, I've got a question for you, Carter. How does your work challenge or extend existing research? And not from a practitioner, think like a researcher and think on that and tell me how it challenges or extends current research based on what you've spent a lot of your time doing.
Ooh, tough question. All right, so how does it challenge or extend research? Well, I think, well, let me get to the second part first. So I think it extends research on the power of, well, let me get my words right. So again, I've been really focusing on that relational trust, right? That efficacy part, right? So I think it extends research on how important it is to build up student efficacy in the different ways. And I think I offer some ways on how that could be accomplished. So not even so much on intervention programs, in these intervention programs, but in their, well, I guess they're in themselves, any student in education. So I think it really extends on that part, is how important it is for that self-efficacy. It offers some ways to do that. The first part of your question, can you repeat it? I'm so sorry.
Well, that's okay. How does your work challenge existing research?
Yeah.
So how has your understanding, maybe in context of the literature of engagement, because you kept mentioning engagement, and there were a couple of precursors for engagement from your data that tied into Aston's, and how is what you found maybe challenge or corroborate literature?
Yeah. I think I guess I'm struggling with that challenge word, because I think this only, like you said, kind of aligns with other literature, right? Supporting those other things, that like these mastery experiences through Bandera's social cognitive theory, how important those intentional experiences are. Aston's theory of student involvement, that shows you that, again, how important program design is, or how important that intentionality of we want our students to be engaged, but again, that intentionality of how to get them involved. And so I think, I don't want to say it challenges it, but it rather supports it more, which I don't think it was was meaning to do. But it just further aligns with, or excuse me, it further supports those frameworks.
Thank you. Good job, man.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I am going to pause the recording. Get the right one here. Let me pause the recording, and Dr. Stone and Dr. Hartman and I are going to now go to a Teams link, and we're going to do the committee deliberation here. Oh, by the way, I see Miranda Griggs with us today. Congratulations. She had her dissertation final defense approved today. And she will be defending sometime after April 9th. So congratulations, Miranda. So let me start.